So this is a talk about how to have a one-on-one conversation with a difficult colleague for the purpose of connecting with them so that you can start to build a relationship and do great work together. And I had a bunch of stuff in here about how to prepare for the talk, but I cut most of it for lack of time, so let's just hit 2 points really quickly. First, Google Metta, M-E-T-T-A, which is a loving-kindness meditation, and do this for that person before the conversation. It's really important when you go into a tough conversation that you have feelings of goodwill and tenderness for the person, and if it's a difficult person, those can be pretty inaccessible, and this is the best way I know how to do that. And then second, once you've done that meditation, sit down and spend some actual minutes of clock time trying to see the world through that person's eyes. You have to be really careful here because both of you will have different stories about the world, and if you're not careful, you will implicitly superimpose your story onto theirs in a judgmental way, and that's not the goal. The goal is put your story aside, spend some time with their story trying to understand it. All right, now, you're having the conversation. The fundamental goal of this conversation is empathizing and connecting to build rapport and intimacy. So you have a relationship, and so you can do better work together. There are many ways to do this, and I'm going to talk about one script that I find myself kind of going to over and over. First is start from a place of mirroring the other person. So, I mean, the obvious stuff like mirror body language. If they're really kind of all forward and up in your shit, kind of reciprocate. But if they're kind of sitting back and they're a little more hesitant, do the same thing. But also mirror them in other less obvious ways, like power dynamic, right? If you're talking to someone who's used to being in charge, you have to come to the conversation with the same kind of confidence and nonchalance. You have to be very careful not to be defensive about anything they say, or they'll immediately pigeonhole you as beta or one down, right? But if you take that same approach with someone who's a little more timid, it's going to be super intimidating. So in that case, be a little more subdued. All right. The one way that I don't mirror people in this case is that I take the first step in terms of offering my own vulnerability. Maybe we're getting coffee and we sit down and I say something to the effect of, you know, the other day in this meeting I was really frustrated, I just didn't feel like I was communicating very well, to kind of open things up that way. And I do this because I have a fundamental belief that everyone has a deep longing for vulnerability because we all really want to be seen. But we're also really scared of it because when you're vulnerable, you're able to be hurt. So when I offer my own vulnerability, I'm doing it to kind of demonstrate, like, hey, the water's fine, you can come in, to get them started. There's some subtlety to choosing what vulnerability you offer, so a couple details there. First, I avoid saying anything confrontational. For example, I would not start by saying, the other day you did this thing and it was very hurtful to me, because while that is offering vulnerability, it's also calling them out, which can be challenging and doesn't make people feel safe to be vulnerable. Once you actually have a good relationship with someone, that's a wonderful thing to do because that kind of honesty is good at building intimacy, but don't start there. And then the second thing is, if I have a sense for what this person's vulnerabilities might be, I try to start with a similar one of my own. So for example, if this is a person where I have some sense that they have some insecurity around their work not being valued, I might start there by talking about a time that I had the same thing, like, you know, man, I felt like I did this great work and nobody noticed and it really stung. And maybe then I'll prompt a little, like saying, you know, like, does that, you know, have you ever had that, or does that make sense? Maybe I'm the only one. If you do this right, the vulnerability thing, I find that you get one of three responses. Number one is just, it works, the person opens up, you can build a relationship, this is just success, right? You have a lot of hard work to do, but now you can do it. And the second one, which feels different than the first one, but really isn't, is that they're a little hesitant, they're a little slow to open up, but you have the sense that they will. So you get to the same place, right? You can still build a relationship, it's just you have to be a little patient. Now the third one is, some people, when you offer vulnerability, they kind of switch into this mentor mode. Like, they get a little condescending, and they kind of approach it as like, let me help fix this problem that you've brought to me. I find that this is usually people who believe in their own story so much that they kind of have lost the ability to feel their own craving for vulnerability. Like, that beginner mind is just totally inaccessible. So in this case, I do something a little sneaky, which is I will play along and be the curious student, you know, learning from the master, but I'll try to direct my questions towards areas where I have the sense that they have some vulnerability and try to kind of poke at it a little bit. You know, like if you take the person who's insecure about his work being valued, I may say, you know, hey, thanks, this is all really awesome advice. And one more thing maybe you can help with, you know, do you have any advice for people getting people to notice your work and appreciate it? Because sometimes I feel overlooked. Right, with thinking, you know, he might respond and say, well, actually, you know, that's kind of tough for me too. And if it doesn't work, I kind of keep pushing and feigning innocence as I ask more and more pointed stuff like, okay, because, the other day when you showed Kurt that thing, he seemed like he was kind of dismissive, and if that had been me in your shoes, that might have been kind of hurtful. So it's no guarantee, but it's a way, again, to show that you're comfortable being vulnerable and also to try to poke at some tender spots to make them aware in the moment of their own vulnerabilities. Because that's the thing, the position that they're taking is this kind of pretending to be invincible, right? But while they can give support from there, they can never receive support from there. And when you're in a position where you can do both, it's just really more satisfying. So, and I think this is important. I really approach this work, this kind of trying to poke at this person's vulnerabilities, not as a kind of aggression or dominance or manipulation, but rather come at it from a place of love, because I really feel like it's doing good. I'm probably way over time already, but there's a lot more to talk about here, but that's how I get started. And I think if you can do this stuff well, it really sets you up with a solid foundation for working together. And then I also think, fundamentally, this is one of the most important things in all of life, because this is how you connect with people. And my experience is that relationships with people are the most basic element of my happiness in life. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much.